Oh, howdy all, grab yourselves a beer. It is time for some Path of Exile discussion. Now today, I wanted to go through the various information about the Blight League that's been released today. The big news from my perspective isn't actually what you see on the screen at the moment, which is the new Headhunter Divination card. The big news comes about with changes to magic items that can roll caster mods. So I'll come back to that in a sec. But just firstly, there is this Divination card, the Demon, for a 2 Implicit Corrupted Headhunter. Note that it is not item level 84 or higher. This means that under the current way that corruptions are set up, it cannot possibly get the increased item quantity corruption on a Headhunter from this Divination card. It will still, however, be very, 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 very valuable. And also expect this card to be extremely rare. This is not something that you're going to be able to compile a set of yourself in pretty much any circumstance, I don't believe. I mean, maybe someone that completely no-lifes the whole league might be able to. This is going to be one for the trade leagues only. This card's existence, however, will push up the price of stacked decks considerably. Stacked decks provide a random divination card, but they have an unusual weighting system. Where normal divination card weighting is heavily biased towards the more common cards, stacked decks use a different system of biasing. And according to some commentary by the person that designed the stack deck, the way that it works is that instead of the normal divination card weighting being used, the square root of that weighting is used. So for instance, if it was 10,000 times as likely to receive a Boon of Justice divination card as it was to receive a Fiend divination card, instead of 10,000 times as likely with a stack deck, it's 100 times as likely to get Boon of Justice as it is to get the Fiend divination card. That means that the Demon card, even if it were to be twice as rare as the Fiend card or 4 times as rare as a Doctor or something like that, it's actually going to have a disproportionate effect once you take a square root of all of those ratios. So expect this to push up the price of stack decks higher than they currently are. Stack decks this league in the Legion League got to about 8 Chaos, 9 Chaos at one point. I expect that they'll be 12 or 13 in the next league, assuming that that you're selling them in some degree of bulk. In any case, that's the Demon Divination card. Let's get on to the most interesting piece of news for the day. And that is the Cane of Raveling Ezomite staff, you can see here, has got some little changes to it. This isn't the item I'm most excited about, but it is significant. Firstly, plus 54% to Chaos Damage over Time multiplier. We used to call this stat NAC-DOT, non-ailment Chaos Damage over time. This stat is now going to work on poisons. But here's the interesting one. Plus 2 to the level of all Chaos Spell skill gems. Now, Natalia from GGG has confirmed, and this has been a little bit of an early teaser of the Balance Manifesto that's coming out, that this stat is going to be available on more weapons. So it's going to apply to Taran Shiva, the 4 Agnerod staves. For some reason, I always call them Agelrod. I don't know why. It's clearly an N, but for some reason, I always imagine it as an L there. Cane of Unraveling and the Consuming Dark. The Consuming Dark is a dagger that has +1 to fire skills, and now that becomes global, it may actually be quite a compelling item. It has conversion for fire damage converting into chaos, which is a conversion that is very, very, very hard to get by any other sources. The big news, though, with these mods isn't the unique items that are being reworked. The big news is that these mods, will be available to some extent on magical and rare caster weapons. This is something that we'll get full details on in the future, but it is going to be absolutely phenomenal. Can you imagine having a Bloodstained Fossil crafted dagger that has an Abyss socket in it, and that has +1 to the level of all fire gems? And this is something that would be absolutely incredible for the purposes of a Vaal Fireball character. Suddenly it's giving you 10% more damage to the Fireball gems that are in your chest, as well as having all of the other effects of a Bloodstained Fossil and an Abyssal socket as well. So yeah, this is going to be something really, really potentially powerful when it's rolled out. More information coming on that next week, though. The last thing that I wanted to touch on is that we've had some information on new gems for assassins. Now, when they say new gems for assassins, they're thematically linked to the assassin poison archetype that they're trying to push for this league, but that doesn't mean that they're exclusive to assassins. All classes, not just shadows, can use them, and all ascendancies can. Just that they're going to synergize specifically with some of this. They're going to play to the strengths of the assassin. Cobra Lash is the first one, and this is a chaining projectile skill. It looks a bit like a Spectral Throw when you see it, but a non-returning version of Spectral Throw, except when it hits an enemy, it starts chaining. This looks really exciting. It's exclusive for daggers and claws, so one-handers, and you fling out a copy of the weapon, creating a projectile that chains multiple times. The skill chains between more enemies at higher levels, and this immediately makes me think Gloomfang, Gloomfang, Gloomfang. The skill grants additional added chaos damage and some chaos conversion with a chance to poison. And any critical strikes will have plus 50% to poison damage multiplier, making the skill quite powerful later in the game if you specialize in critical hits. This is one of many sources of damage over time multiplier for poison. We've also added poison damage over time multiplier to many passives, and as we said before, changed many sources of chaos damage over time multiplier so that they're no longer limited to non-ailments. Next up is Pestilence Strike. This just basically looks like a poison version of the existing skill Infernal Blow. No one uses Infernal Blow because it's mechanically bad. I expect that that'll be the case for Pestilence Strike as well. I'm just not excited about this skill. Elusive is a new buff, so I was sort of hoping that this would be something akin to the Ghost Shrouds that the Trickster can get, but Elusive grants 40% increased movement speed as well as 20% attack and spell dodge. Now 20% attack and spell dodge is really powerful if you're already heavily invested in dodge. Dodge is a mechanic that has very strong escalating returns, much like increased maximum resistances. The first point of dodge is a tiny little bonus, but once you've already got high dodge, each additional point that you get is an enormous amount. You notice that with maximum resistances, especially before the recent change that hard capped all player resistances at 90%. Before that, getting your resistances, say going from 75 to 85, would have about as much effect on your survivability as going from 95 up to 98. 95 up to 97. So even though 95 to 97 is only a 2% increase, the escalating returns meant that that had about as much of an impact on your survivability as the first 10 points of max res. Now, increasing max res beyond 90 is no longer possible, and it wouldn't surprise me if they put in hard caps at 90% on dodge and spell dodge at some point as well. But in any case, that's elusive that's elusive discussed, or the first part of it. That's its strongest point. Unlike other buffs, elusive doesn't have a duration, but instead loses buff over time until it is removed upon reaching 0% effect. So the way that I think of this mechanically is that perhaps you start with 20 stacks of elusive, and this ticks down rapidly, and each stack gives you 2% move speed, 1% attack and spell dodge. We'll see exactly how it plays out in practice. This means that increasing your buff effect also increases how long the effect on you lasts. Most sources of elusive will not overwrite an existing elusive buff on you. So think of this as a bit of a panic button that you can press. If you feel like you need a sudden burst of speed or a sudden burst of dodge, then you can press your elusive button, but then it will fade away over time, and you won't be able to use it again until sometime after it has run out. A new notable on the Assassin Ascendancy will have a chance to grant elusive, and the buff can also be gained from the following two gems. Withering Step is an instant spell that removes any elusive effects on you and grants you a full strength elusive buff. It then applies multiple stacks of Withered to any enemy that comes into close proximity to you, but up only a maximum of once per enemy per skill use. Now, Withered is the same as the debuff that the Wither skill gem provides, which increases chaos damage taken. Now, while this is active, you'll be granted phasing, and the cooldown on Withering Step will be paused. Any skill you perform will remove elusive, which will then start the cooldown refreshing. And at higher levels, the skill has increased elusive effect. This is quite complicated, but the way that I see it is, think of this as being like a button that you can press for. It's not exactly a Quicksilver Flask and Phasing Flask in a single piece, but it's not that far from it. Also, it gives enemies around you a debuff that increases the poison damage they take. I really need to play around with this in practice. At the moment, I'm not impressed with Withering Step, but if the numbers are there, then it may be quite good. Finally, there's Nightblade support, which is exclusive to daggers and claws, just as close combat and shockwave supports are exclusive to other melee weapon types. It grants base crit chance. Base crit chance is very, very powerful, and it's the reason people use the increased critical strikes gem at all. And supported skills also grant elusive on critical hit. Elusive granted by attacks supported by Nightblade also grants crit multi to Nightblade supported skills, and because the first multiplier is part of elusive, it scales with elusive effect, granting over 100% crit multi at level 20 when first applied. Again, really just need to see this in action. I'm not sold on Nightblade yet, but it may be good. And it's worthwhile having a quick look at the video here, the new gems for assassins in Path of Exile Blight. If you haven't already seen it, I won't play it here because it sort of explains itself, but it is worth a watch. There's also more information coming on mines and more skills to come, and more poison info next week. Anyways, that's all I've got on this slot. I'm really excited about these changes to skill gem levels, to the introduction of global plus levels to skill gems coming as caster mods in the future, and I expect that we will see a lot of really ridiculous crafts with those in the future. It also again provides more ways to hit that magic level 31 on the Herald of Agony. And yeah, of course, the Demon, 2 implicit corrupted headhunter. This item is brokenly good, and this is the most powerful form of it that can exist. Anyways, have a good one.